Hello, my name's Gavin, and this is Genre Books, and today I'd like to talk about a booktube reading event that is not due to happen for another month. But there are booktube events, and there are booktube events, but this one is right up my street. Rocket Summer was created by Michael K. Vaughan and is dealing with classic science fiction. It is split into 4 weekly prompts set chronologically, where we would look at science fiction literature from before 1940, 1940 to 49, 1950 to 59, and 1960 to 69. Week 1 covers a lot, so I have given myself a natural cut-off of the year 1900, but there's still an awful lot to choose from. I'm not too keen on the phrase pile of possibilities, but to call this a TBR would be silly. There's not a chance I will get these read in 1 week. For this video, I'm just going to be looking at the things that I would like to read in that first week. So this is science fiction before 1940, and I want to start with what is becoming a favourite of mine, which is pulp science fiction. And I have here from June 1937, Thrilling Wonder Stories. I really want to be reading this. One of the exciting things about these magazines is that there is just going to be a mix of writers I know about and some that I don't, and ones that I've heard of but have not yet read. So in this issue, for example, we have a novelette from someone who's becoming a bit of a favourite, which is John Russell Fearn. Another novelette from Iando Binder, the brothers Binder, and short stories from Raymond Z. Galoon and Frank Belknap Long, both of which I really like. Then there are writers that I've not read yet, so Arthur Leo Zagat, Anthony Rudd, J. Harvey Haggard, Richard Tooker. It's not a guarantee of quality being in one of these magazines, but there is generally something to latch onto and like with almost any story that comes up. This particular magazine was edited by Mort Wessinger, who, as well as editing Thrilling Wonder Stories during the 1930s, was also an editor on Startling Stories, Captain Future, and someone who made the leap to comics. He, just before the Second World War, began working on Superman. After the war, continued working on Superman, became a story consultant on the original Superman television series. He also managed to convince a number of pulp writers to make the leap to comics as well, and poached to DC talent like Binder, Manly Wade Wellman, and others that I will have forgotten and will hopefully list below. Continuing with short stories, and also a chance to knock one of the big names off the list for Rocket Summer, would be to read Before the Golden Age, edited by Isaac Asimov. This is his selection of stories, writers who are the ones that inspired Asimov to write science fiction. So all the stories in this volume are from the 1930s, and there are stories by Edmund Hamilton, Neil R. Jones, who is a writer that has been cropping up a lot in the first issues of Planet Stories that I've been doing some deep dives on. Captain S.P. Meek, Clifford D. Simak, Charles R. Tanner, and Jack Williamson. So some big names from science fiction, and with Jones, Tanner, possibly Captain Meek, some names which are possibly a little less familiar these days. In the last few years, someone's tried to apply a name to those stories that appeared before the Golden Age, and they have plumped for the Radium Age. And I have 2 volumes of voices from the Radium Age, and more voices from the Radium Age, and these might be worth dipping into. There are quite a few names in this first volume which are familiar to anybody. Ian Forster is in here, Arthur Conan Doyle, Jack London, W.E.B. Du Bois, William Hope Hodgson makes an appearance, and Neil R. Jones resurfaces. In fact, the story chosen is the same one from before the Golden Age. But there's also a story by Ruqayya Sakhawat Hussain called Sultana's Dream from 1905, which I've not heard of before, so excited to get my teeth into this one. In a similar vein, the second volume is a mix of authors familiar and unfamiliar. So we have A. Merritt, Algernon Blackwood, E. Nesbitt, H.G. Wells, Booth Tarkington in what must be a fairly rare excursion into science fiction, with his story from 1926, The Veiled Feminists of Atlantis. May Sinclair, a writer I've not heard of. The same for Valery Bryusov with the story from 1907, The Republic of the Southern Cross. So Russian science fiction that preceded even the Bolshevik Revolution. And George C. Wallace, The Last Days of Earth. So an interesting mix of writers. Now, I don't know whether the Radium Age is going to stick as a label, or whether we do just call this all science fiction or scientific romance. And quite frankly, what was wrong with scientific fiction other than anyone knowing how to pronounce it? As tempting as it would be to just read short stories for the entire week, there are some great novels to consider as well. Edgar Wallace with Planetoid 127. Now, in April I read King Kong, which may or may not have input from Edgar Wallace, or certainly had input, but the amount is highly debatable. So I would like to give this one a go to look at the Wallace style and train of thought completely untramelled. A year or so ago I read When Worlds Collide by Philip Wylie and Edwin Balmer. I had fond memories of watching the 1950s film on probably a rainy Saturday afternoon as a child, and the novel didn't disappoint. The novel, however, is fairly difficult to obtain just by looking through second-hand shops, so it's not something that you would say is widely available. It was, however, really easy to find compared to the sequel. I could not, in those following 18 months, find a copy of this book at any shop that I visited, so I did end up resorting to eBay and had this shipped from the States, which is After Worlds Collide. Same writers. It appeared, I believe, a year after When Worlds Collide, and simply continues the story. I would be very interested to find out whether the quality is maintained. 2 more possibilities come via the British Library and their science fiction classics line. The first of these is Muriel Jaeger's The Question Mark from 1926. Her hero, disgruntled office worker Guy, is pitched 200 years into a future London where each citizen is offered free education and a personal power box granting access to communication, transportation and entertainment. To Guy, the great challenges facing society seem solved, but its inhabitants tell a different story of a fractured life in the supposed utopia. Preceding the publication of Huxley's Brave New World by 5 years, The Question Mark is a significant cornerstone in the foundation of the dystopia genre and an impressive work of literary science fiction. So that sounds like a recommendation to me. Another possibility is Wild Harbour by Ian MacPherson, which is from 1936 and set in the year 1944, a year he predicts there's going to be a Second World War. Something has happened in Europe. Committed to pacifist principles, Terry and Hugh retreat from their home to the remote highlands of Scotland, preparing to eke a simple existence together while the fighting resolves itself far away. Encouraged by Terry, Hugh begins a journal to note down the highs and lows of his return to nature. Between the joys of foraging for berries and the rugged reality of killing for meat, it seems life in the wilderness may offer consolation for the fugitive couple. But as the sound of gunfire by night grows louder, the grim prospect of the encroaching war threatens to invade their isolation and erode any hope for lasting peace. So, no ray guns, no rocket ships, but a novel of the near future, talking about a Second World War when it was published just 3 years before the Second World War began. One of the joys of reading old science fiction is looking at the speculation for what is for the writer a time in the future and what is for the reader a time well in the past, to see what they got right, and sometimes it can be uncannily accurate, and at other times so wide of the mark you'd think a stormtrooper was shooting. Just coming in under the wire with its publication in 1939 is the Hopkins Manuscript by R.C. Sherriff. This is the story of life in a provincial English village which is threatened when it looks like the moon is going to crash into the earth. This is, I think, going to be something perhaps in the realm of cosy catastrophe, a subgenre of science fiction that any reader of John Wyndham, or to an extent John Christopher, will hopefully be familiar with. I've been interested to read this one for quite some time, so it's going on that pile of possibilities. I wish Rocket Summer was lasting all summer long. And my last choice is going to be a continuation thematically from some books I was reading at the beginning of the year, with The Hamptonshire Wonder by J.D. Beresford and Odd John by Olaf Stapledon. And this is The New Adam by Stanley G. Weinbaum. Edmund Hall was born a genetic freak. His brain and the powers it could wield set him above the world of ordinary men. He was the successor of mankind in the evolutionary scale, but to the normal beings around him, Hall was a freak, a monster, a new Adam in a world of frightened submen. So this does look to be definitely continuing that theme from the Hamptonshire Wonder and Odd John, of the reaction of society to a superior being within their midst. And it'd be interesting to get the American perspective on that theme. So there's plenty to choose from, and I'm going to be on the horns of a dilemma when selecting what to read during that first week of Rocket Summer, but I don't think I'm going to be disappointed whatever I do opt for. I have a month yet to either ponder my choices or find a way to dilate time so that I can fit them all in. Until that point, Bye.